I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good.
Tim, that was Donald Trump floating the prospect of eliminating FEMA altogether. Now, you live in New Orleans, in Louisiana, a state that is one of the most impacted states in the entire country by natural disasters, by hurricanes. I think it was the third most impacted in the last few decades by natural disasters, just behind Florida and Texas. Can you not see the backfire in the making by virtue of Donald Trump doing this?
I can. I don't even know who's in his head on this one. A lot of times you can kind of see through the Trump gambits and like whether it's something that he really wants attention for, or he's mad at somebody on the left, so he wants to make them cry. And maybe that's the case here. He's trying to get back at Gavin Newsom, and he thinks this might be a good way to punish them. But I mean, this is a major self-own if he actually went through it, both on the political side of it and just as far as a red state, blue state element. So I'll just take the second part first really quick. You mentioned like the states that are the most susceptible to natural disasters besides California are these Gulf Coast red states, including Louisiana, where I am, but honestly from Florida all the way over to Texas, including Mississippi and Alabama. All red states, like rearranging FEMA so that those states had to pay for themselves is going to be, pun intended, I guess, a disaster, like particularly for Louisiana, Mississippi. And on the political side, I think he's really, on dangerous turf here. I go back to kind of my early days back when I was a Republican with Bush and like Katrina and how that ended up becoming such a problem for him. And then you saw it with with Hurricane Sandy, how that ended up becoming very important in 2012. Like natural disasters really play on the psyche in a different way than a lot of other political issues. And to really politicize this the way he has in California, and to try to say that that we're going to leave people out to dry in certain situations and certain types of folks, it's a big risk. I don't really understand what the return is, and what you're end up with is I saw a cheeky tweet today from somebody. It's like, this is great for Minnesota, like some of these like states, some of these blue states that don't have this type of exposure,
right?
Are like, okay, well, fine, we'll call your bluff on that. So I think it's a real risky bet, and I don't really understand what it's getting him, to be honest.
Right. Not only is it disproportionately harmful to the red states who are going to lose that federal funding, but it actually helps the blue states that don't even have to buy back in because there are no natural disasters that impact them. And so that's the Minnesotas of the world that you're talking about, the Illinois of the world that you're talking about, that pay in and don't need to recoup any of that money because wildfires don't hit them, hurricanes don't hit them.
Tornado here or there, but it's not the same scale.
We should also talk about the fact that, yes, California is a blue state, but there are millions of Republican voters here in California where I am right now, and that in large part allows, the House was won for Mike Johnson, for Republicans, by virtue of some of the seats out here in California. What about the backlash that Trump is poised to face by virtue of all of these Republicans here? I mean, there are more Republican Trump voters in California than the entire state populations of a vast number of states that Trump relied on to win the 2024 election.
Yeah, for sure. And I would assume, like, for example, like on the face of it, some of those Republicans in California would be like, well, yeah, I agree. We should have voter ID, and, we should let the water go to the farmers, and we shouldn't block the water from the smelt or whatever Donald Trump's weird obsession is there. But that this is one of those situations where that political affiliation, begins to soften when it gets when like there are real life consequences that are being met with it. And like in Southern California, I mean, look, you live there. Everybody knows somebody that is affected by this, right? Everybody does. So even if they didn't lose their house, like they have a friend that did. And if this goes on for a while and he's playing these political games with this, I do think that there's potential for backlash. As you mentioned, I think California is very important in the midterms. It's not in a presidential year, but in the midterms, a lot of these House seats are a lot of the swing House seats that are going to be the campaigns are going to focus on are in even particularly Southern California.
Yeah.
And then just, again, the Pandora's box of like, is this a fight red states want to pick? I mean, if you're an imaginary world 8 years from now and there's a president AOC and she's like, we're not going to help, the Gulf coasts recover from a hurricane unless they, make abortion legal up to 28 weeks. And like these are just totally that putting voter ID in there has nothing to do with the issue at hand. And so, I do think that it's a dangerous game that he's playing, both just substantively and politically.
So I think one point that can kind of bolster your claim is the fact that Karen Bass is obviously, she's a progressive Democrat who is the governor of Los Angeles. She's obviously facing a ton of backlash by virtue of the fact that she wasn't in LA when the fires broke out. So again, that's a testament to the fact that this kind of supersedes regular partisan affiliation in a way that nothing else does when you have these natural disasters. From your vantage in Louisiana, I mean, I know that you're in this world where you had your whole career in Republican politics before leaving the party, but I'm sure you speak to these people a lot. Is there any sense of, and I know this is a brand new phenomenon with Donald Trump just engaging in this over the last 48 hours, really, where he floated the idea of getting rid of FEMA, which again would be a disaster, no pun intended, for a state like yours. Is that having any impact on the people that you've spoken with in your state or states around yours in terms of how that would impact their perception of Trump?
Just really quick on Bass, to your point, just because I just received a text before we got on today about kind of some private Democratic numbers that just show that she really is suffering locally. Like there are a lot of Democratic voters that are upset about the management of it, fair or unfair. So I like this stuff does have huge political salience that cuts across partisan lines.
Yeah.
I don't. And just in candor, in Louisiana, we have a weird snow right now. So I've been snowed out of Louisiana. I was stuck in New York. So, global climate change has some weird effects here that we're dealing with 10 inches of snow in New Orleans. But I will be interested to find this out. I'm going to be up in Baton Rouge next week and kind of having conversations with people. It is people in places that deal with this stuff frequently. I do think the attitude towards it is different. Is I guess one thing that I will say. Like it's true here in Louisiana. I think it's true for people in California and Florida. When I worked for Jeb, like Jeb's kind of attitude towards natural disasters, was much different, than his attitude to, issues that fall, more on like cultural partisan lines, right? It's like it is that if you actually care about a community and you actually care about the people in the community, no matter what their partisan ideology is, then like this is a time for communities to come together. And I think that just that hits people on a visceral level, and I think that messing with that is really dangerous.
Well, I think what it does is really puts on full display that Trump's contempt for people that haven't given him something, like in this case, votes, outweighs his desire to help even the people who did vote for him. And so that's what we're seeing right now is that even the people who voted for him on this pretense that he was going to swoop into office and help them and lower costs and do all the things that he promised to do, what they really did is just embolden somebody who is driven solely by his ego and his desire for retribution. And while that might seem nice in a vacuum and seem like it doesn't impact you in a vacuum, when it's going to come at the cost of you being able to receive aid because his desire to hurt California is just that visceral, I think that's when it comes into focus that like this is the danger of electing somebody who is driven by rage and hatred as opposed to any semblance of a desire to actually unite the country or help the people who he is purporting to lead right now.
Yeah, and you can see how this affects people now, again, and how this splashes back on people in his own coalition, like not just in California. But right, North Carolina is kind of getting sucked into this right now, right? Because North Carolina, because of the hurricane that affected Western North Carolina, he stopped there on the way to California, and it was there that he's making the comments about, I don't know how if FEMA should be doing this, and it should be local folks that are affected. It's like, if you were in Asheville, right, or if you're, I guess Asheville's kind of the liberal part of Western North Carolina, but if you're in the rest of Western North Carolina right now, and you have had real damage to your community as a result of that hurricane, I don't know that I feel that. I don't know that I want to get swept up into this like political food fight with Gavin Newsom, right? I would rather have somebody in the government that's like, I just want to put a competent person at the head of FEMA who's going to help make sure that we get the recovery funds and assistance that we need. And I'll fight with the the libs over something else, right? So I don't know. I just think that you can see the consequences of it already developing, here in the first few days.
Well, that seems like a good place to leave off. Hope you guys are safe in New Orleans. Good luck contending with the snow. I think you told me off camera that this was the first time in 15 years that you've had any snow. Is that correct?
0 inches of snow in 15 years, 10 inches in my backyard right out there just 3 days ago. So, I grew up in Colorado. So 10 inches not that big of a deal for Denver, but let me tell you, our infrastructure was not ready for it. We were borrowing plows from Indiana.
Yeah.
So it took a little while to get everything going, but I think we're going to be all right.
All right, well, glad you guys are safe. And again, for those who are watching right now, if you want to support the work that Tim and his team are doing, which is, look, taking a lot of these folks who were longtime Republicans, longtime conservatives, and speaking truth to power in a party that has just veered off the cliff to the right, please make sure to subscribe to the Bulwark. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Tim, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.